Contrary to what is believed by many in the conservative, liberal, and even libertarian movements, freedom is not the end-all in society. It's not the greatest virtue by which free men live their lives or by which government gains legitimacy. Freedom has limitations, and it's a double-edged sword. After all, if freedom is always good, then why is not anarchy the best form of government? I certainly wouldn't say that freedom is wrong, but, as James Madison said, men are not angels. Ergo, God has ordained governments amongst men that regulate the behavior by just laws. But then, if government is inherently good, then why isn't perfect tyranny the best form of government? Surprisingly, it is. The Bible describes an end-time scenario whereby God himself will rule as king. He will exercise the most complete form of power over his people, since he will govern their hearts and their minds as well as their body and actions. But until God himself steps down from heaven and assumes his role as secular as well as spiritual leader, mankind must elect leaders from among the mortal stock. These leaders act as regional stewards of power in the absence of God's immediate presence, and as such they bear an awful responsibility, which is why we are commanded to pray for them. Since God is perfect, he can be trusted with complete power. Indeed, it would be wrong to deny him that complete power. But all mankind is fallen, and the same fallen nature that necessitates a government to begin with is just as present in a ruling man. Ergo, wise men of the past have erected limitations on our rulers in the form of constitutions. This is for the protection of our liberties. The great dialectic of civil government is the balance of power, not just between branches of government, but between the government itself and the people. Government is necessitated because man is not God, and constitutions are necessitated because government's not God either. Since we've established that neither the government nor the citizens can be trusted with ultimate providence, the question then is one of how much freedom should the government allow, or rather put, how much autonomy should the people allow? Now, as a self-described libertarian, I definitely err on the side of less power for the government. But that's when freedom, the worshipful deity, envisioned by the founders, cited in the halls of Congress, debated in academia, and demanded by the populace, rears its ugly head. Well does the Bible say that when the righteous rule, the people rejoice. Because in the end, freedom is only worth so much. Because the value of freedom is directly proportionate to the righteousness of its people. John Adams once said, "Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to govern any other." The entire idea of the social compact assumes that the collective of men are necessarily wise and virtuous enough to select a candidate to rightly rule them. Even freedom of speech assumes that your words will be right more often than not. Freedom to keep and bear arms assumes you will not shoot your fellow man more than use it to protect yourself. Even due process assumes that not all men are inherently guilty of a crime that they've been accused of. Adam Smith's invisible hand cannot afford to be up to much mischief. When rights are abused, the government can, will, and must grow in response. The founders summed up their disapproval of democracy by labeling it tyranny of the majority. A simple democracy is mob rule, and a system whereby 51% can take advantage of the other 49. This is why they instead constructed a republic. In this way, the government maintains the people, and the people maintain the government. In this way, we are actually ruled by the people we elect instead of being ruled by the electors themselves. The liability of all of this, though, is that the advantages of the system are undermined if the virtues of the electorate are poor. Immoral people elect immoral officials who abuse the system and seize more power for themselves. In this way, a republic is reduced to an oligarchy, and then either to an anarchy, which is when the immoral electorate revolts, or to a dictatorship, where the oligarchy concentrates its power. In other words, if we don't follow the moral law of the actual King of Heaven, then our beautiful republic will self-destruct. This is why Benjamin Franklin called the government the Constitutional Convention had created a republic, if you can keep it. You see, in the long run, freedom is not sustainable without morality. This is what so many of my fellow libertarians fail to understand. They often repeat the popular mantra, freedom is the right to be wrong. On the surface, this sounds like a very appealing idea, because we all know that when the government tries to regulate in the name of helping the public good, they usually wind up concentrating more power for themselves, and this inevitably leads to government corruption. But it cuts both ways. If we have the right to be wrong, does not the government also reserve the right to be wrong? In the end, no one has the right to be wrong. We all have the responsibility to obey the commands of Christ. This is the difference between a thinker like Ayn Rand and a thinker like James Madison. It's the difference between freedom-loving people who believe that man created government as a necessary evil, and freedom-loving people who believe that God created government in order to protect unalienable rights.